In the emotional architecture of the bold and the beautiful, love is rarely linear, and healing is almost never complete. Old wounds do not disappear simply because new vows are spoken, and obsession does not dissolve just because happiness appears stable on the surface. It lingers quietly, reshaping itself, waiting for the moment when certainty weakens. Such is the fragile emotional terrain surrounding Thomas Forrester and Hope Logan, whose shared history continues to exert pressure on the present, even as both attempt to move forward in different directions. For Thomas, Hope has never been merely a romantic interest. She has represented absolution, redemption, and the possibility that his darker impulses could be transformed into something worthy. Even as Hope rebuilds her life and recommits to Liam Spencer, Thomas's fixation persists, not loudly, not destructively as before, but internally, as a quiet gravitational pull. He tells himself that he has accepted Hope's happiness, that he respects her marriage. Yet the emotional residue remains. It surfaces in moments of creative frustration, in silences where her absence feels louder than presence, and in the unspoken comparison between what he has lost and what he believes Liam takes for granted. This unresolved tension does not exist in isolation. It seeps into the larger dynamic between the Forrester and Logan families, subtly destabilizing alliances that rely on emotional neutrality. Thomas's lingering attachment becomes an unspoken strain, a reminder that history has not been fully reconciled. Hope senses it, even when it is not expressed. She feels the weight of Thomas's gaze in rooms where nothing inappropriate occurs. And that awareness creates a pressure she cannot fully articulate. It is not fear, nor desire, but discomfort rooted in unfinished emotional business. Into this fragile equilibrium enters a disruptive force in the most unexpected form. A young, exceptionally talented designer whose arrival at Forrester Creations injects new energy into a department long dominated by legacy and repetition. This new employee does not arrive burdened by history or allegiance. Instead, she brings instinct, originality, and a fearless creative voice that challenges established patterns. To Thomas, whose artistic identity has been shaped as much by emotional turmoil as by talent, this presence feels immediately transformative. At first, Thomas experiences the shift as purely professional. The young designer's ideas reignite his passion for creation, reminding him of why he fell in love with fashion before it became entangled with obsession and regret. Her perspective is unburdened by his past mistakes, and that absence of judgment offers a rare sense of freedom. For the first time in years, Thomas finds himself focused not on proving his worth to someone who doubts him, but on collaborating with someone who sees him simply as a visionary. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, Thomas's attention begins to shift. The mental space once occupied by thoughts of hope is now filled with sketches, late-night design revisions, and conversations that stretch beyond necessity into curiosity. His new muse does not replace hope as a symbol of redemption, but she offers something different, inspiration without expectation. She does not ask him to be better, she assumes he already is. This distinction alters Thomas at a fundamental level. Their professional relationship accelerates with startling speed. Creative chemistry, when paired with mutual respect, creates intimacy even in the absence of intention. Ideas flow effortlessly, trust forms quickly, and admiration deepens into something neither initially names. Thomas recognizes the danger of proximity, yet he also recognizes its honesty. This connection is not rooted in longing for the unattainable. It is grounded in the present, in shared momentum and tangible achievement. As Thomas becomes more visibly engaged with his work and less emotionally tethered to hope, the shift does not go unnoticed. Hope, who has grown accustomed to being the emotional axis around which Thomas's world once revolved, begins to sense the change. At first, it registers as relief. She believes this is what she wanted. Thomas moving on, finding purpose beyond her. Yet relief soon gives way to something far more unsettling. Hope finds herself watching Thomas from a distance, observing his renewed confidence, his ease, and the absence of the intensity that once defined their interactions. The realization that she is no longer the center of his emotional universe triggers an unexpected response. Jealousy surfaces quietly, not as a desire to reclaim Thomas, but as a disruption of self-perception. For years, Hope defined herself as the moral compass, the unattainable ideal. Thomas's fixation reinforced that narrative. Now, without it, she feels oddly unmoored. This internal conflict intensifies when Hope confronts the truth she has avoided. Her feelings toward Thomas have never been purely platonic, nor purely redemptive. Even after remarrying Liam, there remains a part of her that responds to Thomas's transformation with curiosity and unease. She questions whether her discomfort stems from concern for Thomas's well-being, from fear of repeating past mistakes, or from a deeper regret that she never fully explored what they might have been under different circumstances. When Thomas and his new muse make their relationship public, the effect is seismic. Within Forrester Creations, the announcement reshapes perceptions and alliances overnight. Thomas is no longer viewed as a man trapped by obsession, but as someone capable of growth, partnership, and emotional evolution. His new relationship reframes his narrative, positioning him as a creative leader reborn rather than a liability restrained by history. For Hope, the public confirmation forces confrontation. Seeing Thomas with someone else, not in theory but in reality, dismantles the illusion that she still holds a place reserved in his future. The question she must now face is brutal in its simplicity. Does she truly want Thomas back? Or does she merely mourn the loss of being wanted? This distinction matters because one leads to honesty and the other to self-deception. Hope's marriage to Liam, once a symbol of stability, now feels vulnerable in ways she did not anticipate. Not because Liam has changed, but because Hope has. The resurfacing of unresolved emotion complicates her sense of certainty. She begins to understand that choosing Liam did not erase alternative paths, it merely closed them. Watching Thomas move forward forces her to grieve a version of herself she never allowed to exist. Thomas, meanwhile, experiences his own reckoning. Publicly embracing his new relationship requires courage precisely because it confirms his departure from the emotional pattern that once defined him. He knows that some will question his sincerity, others will suspect substitution rather than growth. Yet he persists, because for the first time, his connection is not born of longing or imbalance, but of mutual creation and respect. The new muse, aware of Thomas's history but not imprisoned by it, becomes both catalyst and mirror. Through her, Thomas confronts the man he has been and the man he is becoming. Their relationship is not without risk, but it is honest in its intent. It challenges him to sustain growth rather than perform it. As this chapter unfolds, the landscape of love within the bold and the beautiful shifts perceptibly. The familiar triangle dissolves, replaced by a far more complex configuration of desire, regret, and reinvention. Hope is no longer simply the object of obsession. She is a woman confronting the consequences of emotional influence. Thomas is no longer defined by fixation, he is defined by choice. This evolution challenges long-held assumptions about destiny within the Forrester and Logan families. It suggests that love is not fixed, nor is redemption singular. People do not always heal by reclaiming what they lost. Sometimes they heal by letting it go and discovering something entirely new. The question now is not whether these characters will change the course of their lives, but how honestly they will face the truth of their own hearts. Hope must decide whether her unease signals unresolved love or wounded pride. Thomas must decide whether his new happiness is sustainable or merely another transformation fueled by circumstance. And Forrester Creations must adapt to a creative dynamic no longer anchored in legacy alone, but in evolution. In this new chapter, the balance of love is no longer dictated by obsession or obligation. It is shaped by awareness, risk, and the courage to step beyond the roles that once defined everyone involved. And as the emotional landscape continues to shift, one truth becomes clear: the most dangerous transformations are not those that destroy relationships, but those that reveal who we truly are when the past finally loosens its grip. The revelation that reshapes everything does not arrive as a rumor or a carefully managed press release. It arrives as recognition. The new muse whose presence has altered the creative atmosphere at Forrester Creations. The woman whose instincts reignited Thomas's artistic discipline and quietly displaced an obsession that once seemed permanent, is none other than Ivy Forrester. The name alone carries history, weight, and consequence, and its return to the center of Thomas's life reframes the entire emotional landscape that has been shifting beneath the surface. In the world of the bold and the beautiful, Ivy is not a stranger, nor is she a blank slate. She represents an alternate past, one that never fully unfolded but never truly disappeared either. Her re-entry into Thomas's orbit is not an accident of proximity. It is the convergence of timing, growth, and unfinished potential. Where hope symbolized redemption through restraint, Ivy embodies creation through equality. She does not arrive as a solution to Thomas's pain, but as a counterpart to his ambition. Someone whose presence challenges rather than soothes. For Thomas, recognizing Ivy as the woman who has become his creative anchor triggers a profound internal shift. This is not the reckless infatuation that once governed his emotional life, nor is it the desperate longing for validation that characterized his fixation on hope. Ivy knows his history. She knows his failures, his manipulations, and the darkness that once defined him. Yet she does not relate to him through fear or moral supervision. Instead, she meets him on equal ground. engaging with his ideas, questioning his instincts, and demanding rigor rather than repentance. This dynamic transforms Thomas's sense of self more deeply than any promise of forgiveness ever could. Their relationship develops not as an escape from the past but as a dialogue with it. Ivy challenges Thomas to confront the man he was without allowing that version to dictate who he must remain. In creative sessions that stretch long past necessity, they rediscover a shared language rooted in design rather than desire. And it is precisely this foundation that allows intimacy to grow without imbalance. Thomas does not feel compelled to impress Ivy by performing growth. He is required to sustain it. When their relationship becomes public, the reaction within Forrester Creations is immediate and layered. Shock gives way to recognition as colleagues recall Ivy's legacy, her talent, and her complicated history with the family. The pairing feels both inevitable and disruptive, a reminder that the Forrester bloodline has always been intertwined with passion and rivalry in equal measure. Thomas, once viewed as a creative liability stabilized only by external boundaries, is now seen as a leader whose clarity emerges from partnership rather than obsession. For Hope Logan, the confirmation lands with unexpected force. Seeing Thomas with Ivy is not like seeing him with a stranger. Ivy carries context, memory, and a legitimacy that makes the loss feel tangible. Hope cannot dismiss this as a phase or a rebound. Ivy's presence signals intention, continuity, and choice. What unsettles Hope most is not jealousy in its simplest form, but displacement. Thomas's evolution no longer centers around her moral gravity. He has chosen someone who does not require him to atone endlessly in order to be loved. This realization forces Hope into an uncomfortable reckoning. Her marriage to Liam Spencer was built on the belief that certainty equals safety. That choosing the familiar would silence the questions she never fully answered. Watching Thomas with Ivy reopens those questions. Not because Hope wants Thomas back, but because she must now confront whether her role in his life was ever as altruistic as she believed. There is a sharp, disorienting difference between letting someone go and being left behind by their growth. Hope's jealousy is not rooted in desire to disrupt Thomas's happiness, but in the realization that his fixation once confirmed her own sense of importance. Without it, she must reevaluate the parts of herself that relied on being needed rather than chosen. This internal conflict begins to cast subtle shadows over her relationship with Liam. Not through betrayal, but through introspection, Hope starts to question whether stability has become a shield against vulnerability rather than an expression of fulfillment. Meanwhile, Ivy's return reverberates through the Forrester family with strategic implications. Her presence strengthens Thomas's position within the company, not because of nepotism, but because of credibility. Ivy brings fresh vision paired with historical understanding, bridging legacy and innovation in a way that commands respect. Together, she and Thomas begin shaping a new creative direction that reflects evolution rather than repetition, signaling a shift in Forrester Creations that cannot be ignored. For Thomas, choosing Ivy publicly is an act of closure. It marks the end of a chapter defined by longing and imbalance, and the beginning of one defined by collaboration and mutual ambition. He understands that some will interpret this relationship as substitution, others as redemption. Neither narrative concerns him anymore. What matters is that, with Ivy, he is not trying to become someone else. He is becoming more himself. As this new chapter unfolds, the balance of love and power within the Forrester-Logan universe is irrevocably altered. Hope is forced to confront the difference between nostalgia and truth. Liam senses the shift even if he cannot name it, feeling the subtle distance that forms when certainty is challenged by memory. And Ivy, standing firmly beside Thomas, embodies the reality that love does not always arrive as salvation. Sometimes it arrives as recognition. In this redefined landscape, obsession gives way to intention, and regret yields to possibility. The past no longer dictates the future, but it no longer disappears either. Instead, it becomes context, acknowledged, integrated, and finally released. And as Thomas and Ivy move forward together, they do not erase what came before. They transcend it, proving that the most powerful transformations are not born from longing, but from the courage to choose differently when the moment finally arrives.